A Russian Mi-8 helicopter crashed in the night sky over Rostov after being hit by a Ukrainian FPV long-range attack drone. The strike came after a series of deep attacks in recent weeks, where the same class of Ukrainian drones targeted ammunition depots and damaged S-400 batteries far inside Russian territory. Those incidents already sparked concerns about how quickly rear areas are becoming vulnerable as Ukrainian long-range systems become more accurate and more persistent. What happened on the night of November 22nd was different. The FP1 had never been seen as an airborne hunter. It was designed to strike fixed targets such as fuel storage, radar stations, or command posts. Yet sensors on the ground confirmed that this drone locked onto a moving helicopter and chased it through the dark sky before destroying it. The downing of the Mi-8 now challenges that view and demands a fresh assessment of the risks facing any helicopter or support aircraft operating near a modern battlefield. This strike indicates that deep strike drones may now threaten helicopters and other aircraft far from the front lines. It marks a change in how deep strike drones can be employed and warns every air force that traditional notions of safe distances may no longer hold in a war driven by cheap precision systems and rapid innovation. The Russian Mi-8 helicopter, a durable utility aircraft modified for counter-drone operations, was actively patrolling the skies over the Rostov region when its sensors picked up a small, fast-moving heat signature. This area is a key hub for Moscow's logistics, packed with valuable ammunition depots and strategic radar sites, making routine anti-drone patrols by these aircraft essential. The helicopter crew was performing what had become a routine but vital task, searching for the common low-cost Ukrainian UAVs that constantly threaten Russian rear positions. The mission was simple: reconnaissance and interception. But on that night, the crew's routine was disrupted when the incoming signal showed a surprising speed of around 115 miles per hour. This speed was notable, fast enough to mislead the onboard systems into classifying the object as a small manned aircraft rather than the usually slower, low-flying loitering munitions they typically tracked. What turned the encounter from standard patrol to intense combat was the target's position. The signal emerged roughly 190 kilometers behind the established Ukrainian front lines, deep within what Moscow regarded as its secure, multi-layered air defense zone. This great distance should have kept the Mi-8 and the critical assets it protected safely in an area where only strategic bombers or costly cruise missiles could normally threaten. The crew probably expected to intercept slow, short-range FPV drones in the patrol zone. They were not ready to face a sophisticated, purpose-built weapon operating this deep into Russian territory. Rostov, located near the border and acting as a major staging point for military trains and supplies moving toward occupied areas, was important enough to require constant air patrols. Russia had increased its reliance on these UAV hunter helicopters because the surge of Ukrainian deep strike attacks had become more frequent and effective. This higher operational pace meant the Mi-8s were flying more hours and covering wider routes, paradoxically heightening their vulnerability to the threats they were supposed to counter. However, this deployment put the Mi-8 right in the path of Ukraine's most advanced long-range capabilities. The Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, SSO, later confirmed the helicopter's destruction, proudly claiming this as the first time in history that a deep strike UAV had successfully downed a helicopter in flight. This key detail emphasizes the significance of the change, noting that the aircraft was not hit while grounded, but was taken out during active flight, a scenario once limited to theoretical discussions. The Mi-8 crew had set out that night as hunters, but they soon realized they had become the hunted in an unprecedented aerial ambush. The fact that the deep strike drone had penetrated multiple air defense layers to reach the helicopter's patrol area undermined the idea of a safe rear zone, indicating serious overconfidence in ground-based systems' ability to detect and neutralize these specialized low-cost threats. The question now facing Moscow is crucial. Do you think Russia was dangerously complacent about the evolving capabilities of Ukraine's long-range UAVs? Music. The FP-1 showed itself as a new type of threat because it acted in ways that defied everything pilots expected from long-range drones. The drone advanced with steady purpose as it approached the Mi-8, and its flight path displayed no sign of evasion or doubt. The helicopter crew initially thought they were tracking a small reconnaissance drone, yet this belief fell apart when the FP-1 positioned itself directly behind the tail where the exhaust and rotor intersect. The drone's persistent pursuit posed a major issue because it implied advanced sensors typically found on guided missiles rather than standard unmanned aircraft. The Mi-8 pilots now confronted a drone designed for deep attack missions that could fly up to 1,600 kilometers and still have enough power to pursue a moving aircraft. The FP-1 further surprised the crew because it made no effort to evade radar and instead showed a clear signature as it neared the helicopter. Light from its optics flashed across the sky as it sought a solid lock on the helicopter's engine zone. The Mi-8 crew responded with defensive maneuvers because they recognized that the drone's determination meant it was not just transiting the area. They drew on training as they tried to gain separation, but the FP-1 remained close and maintained its path. The risk escalated because the FP-1 used a recognition system built to interpret thermal patterns, enabling it to accurately identify the signature of the TV-3117 engines. The drone distinguished between the hot exhaust gases and the slightly cooler rotor vibrations. This capability allowed the drone to disregard the flares the Mi-8 deployed to confuse its sensors. The crew watched the flares burst across the night sky, hoping the drone would veer toward the bright decoys, but the FP-1 ignored each one and stayed locked on the helicopter. The helicopter crew dropped the flare approach and threw the aircraft into sharp turns to break the drone's line of sight. The maneuvers stressed the airframe and required the pilots to balance the helicopter's weight against the incoming threat's speed. The FP-1 countered these evasions with impressive stability and demonstrated it could adapt to directional changes without losing speed. The crew sensed mounting tension because every second shrank the margin between them and the drone. They knew the machine pursuing them acted like a predator, programmed to analyze the target rather than chase random heat sources. If a long-range drone like the FP-1 can examine engine patterns and bypass flares effortlessly, then how secure can modern helicopters stay against AI-guided threats that maintain lock even during aggressive maneuvering? The pursuit between the Mi-8 and the FP-1 became a high-tension aerial duel because every evasion by the helicopter was answered by the drone's relentless response. The crew attempted to escape by repeatedly altering the flight path, and each turn pushed the aircraft into steep angles that tested both the structure and the pilots. The night sky flared with bursts of decoys as the Mi-8 sought to mislead the drone's sensors. Yet the FP-1 maintained its trajectory and did not waver in its chase. The helicopter crew realized they were battling a machine that did not behave like earlier drones, since it interpreted motion via thermal imaging rather than basic heat detection. The stress intensified because the Mi-8 had to depend on door gunners who exposed themselves with a PKT machine gun to fire bursts at the approaching drone. The helicopter rocked during each turn, and the rush of air over the open doors made accurate aiming hard because the FP-1 was a small target moving with precise speed. The tracers streaked across the distance between the aircraft and the gunners, aimed to damage the threat enough for the pilots to escape. The noise of the PKT echoed in the cabin while the pilots worked to stabilize the helicopter, and the joint effort highlighted how dire the situation had grown because evasion and counterfire had to occur simultaneously. The drone sustained several hits as PKT rounds struck its body, yet the FP-1 remained operational because its composite structure absorbed impacts without failing. The drone continued tracking the hot trail from the helicopter and followed the thermal wake behind it. Each effort by the Mi-8 to disrupt the trail only caused a short delay before the FP-1 adjusted and narrowed the gap again. The pilots now understood that the drone had committed fully and would not abort even after taking hits. The pursuit grew more desperate because the helicopter could no longer risk extreme climbs or dives since such moves could lead to a stall. The situation deteriorated when the crew noticed they had been lured away from the initial patrol area. The demands of the chase had pulled the Mi-8 into a broader arc, and this diversion created an opening for additional threats. At lower altitude, a second swarm of Ukrainian drones crossed the defense perimeter because the helicopter was no longer positioned to block them. The FP-1 had inadvertently served as decoy because its chase drew the Mi-8 across the sky and eliminated the only mobile interceptor protecting the base from the approaching group. The ground defenders now faced a limited time frame because the distraction from the aerial duel allowed the low-flying drones to advance toward key sites. If a single long-range UAV can divert a patrol aircraft from its station while another swarm slips forward unseen, then swarm tactics may soon dominate future warfare. The final attack started with the FP-1 ascending above the Mi-8 and targeting a vulnerable angle the crew could not monitor. The helicopter attempted to turn, yet its speed and sensor limitations left it open to an overhead assault. The aircraft had countermeasures, but they were optimized for threats from ahead or the sides. Once the FP-1 achieved superior altitude, the helicopter became an exposed target with minimal escape options. The drone paused briefly at height before diving into a steep attack trajectory that forced the crew into frantic defense. The Mi-8 tried a banking turn, yet the drone had already stabilized its descent. The pilots had to handle both the impact angle and the shrinking time to react. The helicopter's large rotor disc created an easy target for the drone to track. When the FP-1 entered the terminal zone, its modular warhead of about 60 kilograms exploded at proximity. The detonation released thousands of tungsten fragments in a dense sphere that spread over the upper airframe. This fragment cloud created an immediate lethal barrier that light armor could not withstand. The top surfaces of the helicopter were not designed for such concentrated overhead damage, and the effects were rapid. The powertrain and transmission relied on those components for stability and lift, and once compromised, the aircraft started to yaw. The pilot fought for control as the rotors destabilized. The airframe vibrated as the tail rotor failed, and the helicopter entered a tightening spin. Smoke poured from the hit sections, and the crew confronted a crisis no procedure could resolve quickly. The surrounding sky filled with fragments while the drone completed its attack. Some troops in the cabin moved toward the doors in a last effort to bail out from the stricken aircraft. The Mi-8 then plunged in a steep descent that illustrated how fast a heavy transport helicopter can lose control from a top attack. The ensuing crash and explosion ended the engagement and proved the impact of a drone costing far less than conventional missile systems. This one strike poses a profound question for modern warfare. A drone costing tens of thousands of dollars can destroy a helicopter worth millions. Is this the turning point that alters the battlefield power balance? The events over Rostov demonstrated how one effective aerial diversion enabled a follow-on wave that inflicted much greater ground damage. As soon as the Mi-8 was drawn away from the area, several other drones penetrated the reduced coverage and targeted a logistics hub. This facility supported ongoing troop operations in the Rostov region, and its design made it a prime target once the helicopter interceptor was absent. The drones flew low as they crossed open terrain, and each followed a route planned to bypass standard radar coverage. The spacing between them sowed confusion among defenders, and the base had to respond without aerial early warning. The first explosion struck ammunition storage holding Grad rockets, and the resulting fireball drove nearby teams to retreat rapidly as heat spread and shrapnel flew. This section of the base supplied frontline forces, and its loss meant Russian units faced an abrupt shortage of artillery munitions. The blast reverberated across the facility, and defenders began to realize the helicopter engagement was merely the prelude, not the primary goal. The second drone impacted a fuel tanker containing nearly 20,000 liters of diesel, and the strike produced a towering column of black smoke. The fuel ignited fiercely, and internal pressure ruptured the tank. The fire extended to adjacent areas where vehicles were parked, and teams could not relocate the tankers in time. The burning fuel pool beneath created an unapproachable hazard, and the base had to split resources between firefighting and tracking remaining drones. The thick smoke also obscured local sensors, normally used for low-altitude detection. A third blast occurred near a field command center, whose personnel evacuated as the shockwave hit. The command site handled rapid coordination with regional units, and the drone scattered equipment. Fragments damaged external structures, destroyed antennas and severed cables, and nearby depots lost vital communication links for coordinating air defenses. The disruption created an open path for the last drones to advance. The final hit targeted an S-400 radar vehicle undergoing maintenance and unable to move. The explosion tore through exposed panels, and flames reached critical components of the array. With this radar offline, the base suffered further loss of air surveillance, and coverage gaps widened. The drones had finished their sequence of strikes, and the facility endured ongoing secondary detonations into the night. Those fires destroyed power infrastructure, additional shelters, and compelled crews to withdraw to secure areas. This coordinated assault exposed an evolution in Ukrainian tactics because the drones operated in layered groups and attacked the base from multiple angles. The approach prompts a key question. Do you think drones can shift the balance of the Ukraine-Russia war in the coming year? A Ukrainian FP1 downing a Russian Mi-8 deep inside Rostov was not just another report. It was the point where the battlefield subtly transformed. A drone intended for fixed infrastructure suddenly demonstrated it could hunt a helicopter in the night. And that initial strike enabled a series of attacks that destroyed ammo stores, radar systems, and even advanced air defenses hundreds of kilometers from the front. The Mi-8 was just the start. Across Crimea, Bryansk, and Rostov, the FP1 and similar models have compelled Russia to reassess everything from helicopter deployment costs to the security of S-400 systems once considered invulnerable. These drones now function like a low-cost air force that never rests, never wavers, and never fears risk. If an inexpensive long-range drone can bypass layered defenses and strike strategic assets, then no helicopter unit, missile battery, or radar site is fully secure. How far behind the lines is truly safe when a drone can glide silently through the darkness and hit before detection? The true tension now rests on who adapts quicker. Will Russia plug the vulnerabilities? Will Ukraine strike even deeper? Or will another nation adopt these tactics in an unforeseen future war? If you want to track how this new drone era develops, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to War History.